Not all of this is adding up.
My is mine.
Who's your daddy?
Oh, there's no way.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another entry in the community Wheel of Time read-along. Today, we will be talking about Book 4, The Shadow Rising, a book I have noted many times being maybe my favorite, definitely at least one of my favorite Wheel of Time books, and that is for several reasons. Let's quickly do a spoiler-free section. I'm sounding a bit like a broken record, but this is the Wheel of Time book that allowed the Wheel of Time to really break from the tropes it so comfortably laid its foundation with and become the epic that it had the potential to be. Now, let me clarify exactly what I mean by this. Of course, up until now, we've had so many things that fantasy fans will be so familiar with driving the story. The magic sword, the farm boys taking an adventure, old wise wizards, dark lords, all kinds of things that reek of Lord of the Rings and Arthurian legends that are just really foundational to the impression the Wheel of Time gives early on, to the point where the Eye of the World is often said to be just a giant homage to Lord of the Rings. The Shadow Rising takes a turn, and it not only provides the greatest world building that we've seen for this world so far, but there are elements introduced into the mythos we're experiencing that are not seen in any fantasy series up until this point. This breaks so many conventions of what fantasy world building could be. It broadens the horizons of culture and landscape and diversity, and wow. The Shadow Rising, as an avid Robert Jordan fan who knows about some of the troubles he had earlier on getting publishing, it feels like when he reached this book, he knew he didn't have to listen to all the safety feedback from publishers who are like, maybe you couldn't get that published, reel it in, be more restrained. Now, he's like, I've proven my sales, I know I sell, and you can't stop publishing this series. Let's make it what it wants to be. I would say my biggest criticism would be at times the pacing within The Shadow Rising is a touch slower than I think it needed to be, but other than that, it's one of the strongest entries the series has to offer, and I continue to tout its praises to this day. Let's go ahead and jump into the spoiler-filled section of the review. So this book kicks off with Min, a character we have not seen for a bit, arriving at Tar Valon, and she's been given a message to inform the Amerlin seat of basically catching her up onto the events of the series up until the book before last, because Min is not aware of a lot of that. And while she's going through the tower, Robert Jordan's not foreshadowing, because he's explicitly telling us, like, it's gonna go down, but it's not explicit. Min has the ability to see the future in a vague way, and she's seeing all these Aes Sedai, like, covered in blood, awful stuff left and right, and she's like, oh shysters, need to talk to the Amerlin seat. We also, as the book goes on, see exactly what these visions, or at least part of them, were about, because there's this tinge of not all of this is adding up, and no spoilers for later on in the series, but those who know, yeah, there's like a 1-2 punch in the way, but that first punch lands in this book, and it's because Elida basically decides to throw a little coup.
Is it just me, or does Elida give off big energy of the kind of person who would go, yeah, no, sweetie, you didn't do it right? She just gives off that kind of condescension literally every second she's on the page.
And Siuan Sanche is deposed. There's essentially a civil war erupting from the most powerful seat within all of the Westlands, and this is another thing that just adds to the continual weakening we're seeing as we know the last battle is on the way. Robert Jordan takes so much time to make sure you are aware of the fact that humanity is not ready for what is to come, and this is just layering that in, folding it into one to another. So Min then frees Siuan Sanche and her second, and actually snatches up Logain, 3 stilled people, and they manage to escape the tower. Well, essentially the last echoes of this massive battle are still happening. And Logain, oh my god, this character, every reread I like him more, and just the setup and the vibe you get from his presence at this point is so pungent, I guess is the word I want now. Like, there's something toxic about him, but it's not necessarily evil. It just, I don't know. And having Min's vision of glory to come for him, I remember the first time I was reading through the series, it was one of the most tantalizing hooks Robert Jordan planted in my chest and dragged me forward with, because I was like, ooh, false dragon with glory in his future, and he's stilled? Ooh! So, yes. But all right, let's go ahead and pick up with our main group that is currently in tier, because we have our first, I believe, instance of a bubble of evil. Evil is coming into its little reality and going all over tier. This bubble of evil is attracted to Rand, Mat, and Perrin for obvious reasons, and they each have like a survival scenario they have to get through. And I think Mat's is my favorite. It's a quick, he definitely has like the fastest reaction to overcoming it, but it's also the most creative. He's gambling with some people, trying to get enough money to leave the city, and his cards attack him. They come to life, the art begins to pour out, and he has to murder these figures coming from his own art.
Hey, did you slip something into the drinks tonight? No. Why? The king just stabbed me.
And one of my favorite moments of Matt's character is, well, like everyone's recovering from watching this happen and like freaking the hell out, he just starts taking all the money. He's like,
Is mine.
And while the last book definitely is where a lot of fans start loving Matt, this is the book where I think he's solidified as many people's favorite, because he isn't just dumb, bumbling, like, oh, comedic relief. There's so much intelligence to him through his stupidity in this book, and we'll get into that more as we go on, but I love the guy. You also have Perrin, who is having an argument with Aiel. He's trying to find rumors to send her off, and he ends up finding rumors that, oh no, his home is in danger from White Cloaks and Trollocs, is bad, is bad, is bad. But that's not even relevant yet, because what we're focusing on with him is his own axe attacking him, and this nicely goes into the wider conflict that's happening internally to Perrin. I think there's a lot of nuance and creativity with how Jordan often set up an external representation of our characters' internal turmoil, and Perrin's is probably the most heavy-handed because, yes, he is literally fighting the axe that he's constantly worried about. Of course, he overcomes it, and there's like a threat to Aiel at one point, and just knowing the future of the character of Perrin, that was really nice to me on this reread. I just appreciated how much you could read into that if you're a Perrin fan. And then, of course, there's Rand, who's having a sexy dream about some women he's crushing on, and he wakes up to Berelain trying to seduce him. And there's some people who are going to criticize this as like, it comes across as like Robert Jordan writing a man being like, I don't need you, temptress. But with how much tact is actually given to the character of Berelain later on, I don't think she falls into just the temptress trope. She's an extraordinarily intelligent politician who's managed to leverage political gain enough to keep her own tiny nation strong and independent while it's surrounded by greedy, more powerful neighbors. Berelain is not someone to be written off, and ascribing her as just like, oh, the bimbo, which I see many people kind of call her, you're not paying attention, because throughout all like the different political maneuverings that continue on throughout the series, she is someone that stays close to the heart of a lot of it and usually comes out in a more powerful position. So not getting into spoilers, but if this is your first time through, keep an eye on Berelain. She's impressive. But then Rand's reflections attack. There's something so goofy about this. It's, I guess, because it reminds me of Evil Dead, or the third Evil Dead movie where he's fighting his little tiny reflections. I could never take this seriously, but the aftermath of it hits harder than probably any other bubble of evil instance throughout the entire series, because we have, like, you know, Perrin's emotionally traumatized, Matt's definitely freaked out, but Rand, it's another stressing from the author of just how much pressure this guy's under, because he's bleeding out, he's in horrible condition, and he's not wanting help. He's just sitting there trying to take one moment to remember peace, one moment to remember what it was like to just be a farmer with the responsibilities of a sheep herder, and he almost dies as a result. Like, that's, like, in our most stressed moments, you can relate to that. Like, I remember when I was in a car crash when I was a teenager, and I didn't get out of my car immediately because I was just sitting there like, I could have had a good day. I could have had a day where I just went to high school and normal things unfurled, but now I have to deal with this. And I just took a moment to breathe and try and calm myself. And I've always, like, I know it's not nearly as extreme as what Rand's dealing with, but I just know it's in a similar ballpark of why he's feeling that way. It's just like, I could have had peace. I could have had a moment. God damn it. But Perrin, on his way to visit Rand, thinking that he's the one who caused his axe to attack him, arrives and sees him in this condition. And then we have another kind of example of how the power shifting is occurring here. And Moiraine has an interaction where she wants to heal Rand, but he's pushing back, and there's just this different vibe. And it's not Rand being petulant. Well, he definitely still is a bit, as he was before, but there's some kind of authority to the way he's behaving that echoes to a lot of what is to come. And I'm going to keep mentioning this throughout the read along, where there is a secondary voice, it seems like, that is working with Rand, and it's not just what some people are thinking of. I'm going to get into a conspiracy theory I have probably when we're near the end of this, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. After this sequence, there is also talk of a magic doorway, and this is important for several reasons. It also makes sense because Tyr is kind of a stronghold for many magical items. One of my favorite bits of world building here is how the rulers of this city tried to like collect as many magical items as they could to lessen the impact of Kalendor being there, which is so funny to me that they're like, there's this piece of the destiny where apparently the world's going to fall to pieces with this sword kind of at the center of it. I guess that's less a big deal if we get some more stuff, right, guys? No, but this doorway is a portal to another universe that will give you answers. Example, again, of Robert Jordan kind of stepping beyond what a lot of series typically did at the time. He's certainly not the first ever author to speak of multiverse within fantasy, but it's a very physical way. Like, people are actually stepping into it, and we follow Matt as he actually hears of this, and he goes through it, and he is told of the fact that he is going to marry the daughter of the Nine Moons, die and live again, and he must go to Roidion or else he will just die. And that's his answers, and he's not happy with them. In fact, he's kicked out, and he meets up with Rand, and then Moraine comes out, and they're all standing there like, did you get your answers? Did you get what'd you ask? Did you get... I'm not telling. Which is comedic. I actually kind of laughed during this scene, but it's also Robert Jordan setting up how communication is breaking down between our people a bit. There's not the trust that Rand and Matt had when they were out on the road, I feel like, to an extent. Matt specifically is definitely kind of keeping Rand at arm's distance because he's not okay with him being the dragon yet. Though that kind of does break down throughout this book, which is a wonderful little mini arc for their relationship I like. The more time Matt spends with Rand, it feels like the more he's reminded that it's still Rand. Rand then unfurls his plan for the nobles, and he says he's going to go to the Aiel Waste, which Matt's like, cool, that's where Roidion is, so I'm not gonna die, I'm going with you, we're going. And he leaves Kalendor behind as like a reminder to the ruling class. They're like, who's your daddy? Rand. Rand is their ruling daddy. We also have a scene I kind of forgot about where Egwene comes in. She's like, Rand, I view you like a brother I used to hang out with. Don't want to be on that vibe anymore. And he's like, same. And then Elaine's like, Rand, hi. Jokes. I'm joking. Obviously, it's not that explicit, but jokes. But I really like the little practice they had of trying to work with him with Saidin and examples of Saidar. And we know how powerful Egwene is for your average channeler at the time. And having Rand just dwarf both of them together was just kind of awesome to me. And of course, it also shows him out of control a little bit. He's struggling. Oh, Jesus. I entirely forgot also there's an attack that happens where Lanfear shows up. He's like, hey, you're the traveling companion. She's like, nah, I am that traveling companion, but also the whole time, surprise, surprise, I was Lanfear. A gray man comes in with a knife, Rand spots it and kills it, goes outside and sees the Stone of Tears under attack. He just unleashes one attack that kills a lot of the Shadow Spawn, but then realizes like, I need something more powerful after having a bit of a confrontation with Lanfear. Goes back, grabs Kalendor, and this is again where the Wheel of Time pushes beyond what I think a lot of standard magic at the time within fantasy was doing. Because a lot of magic within fantasy up to this point was very, abstract. Like, you kind of just have to wonder about what the magic's capable of. Like Gandalf especially is an example of someone who does do magic cantrips here and there, but you're never really sure what the upper limit of his power is. We see a definite upper limit of Rand's power on display, and it is physical. He creates some kind of super black hole that only sucks in Shadow Spawn and just annihilates and ends the attack on the Stone of Tyr. And he comes across a young woman he was unable to save, and he tries to resurrect her with this extraordinary amount of power at his display. And this is an important scene for two reasons. It shows us just how much Rand is not mentally stable as he's forcing this child back to life, trying to anyway, while simultaneously showing us that even someone using one of the most powerful magical items in existence cannot cure death, because Rand fails, and it tears him apart. And Moraine and Lan, in one of the most dynamic shifting changes to their relationship, are both afraid of Rand, clearly afraid of him in this moment, which I don't blame them. They're absolutely right. It's this out of control, possibly insane already channeler, male channeler, who is standing over a dead child trying to resurrect it, losing his mind. Everyone would be freaking terrified walking in on that. But then after all this, Rand unveils his plan and then begins his pilgrimage to Rhuideon. But let's first focus on Perrin's journey. Oh, also, Egwene was in the dream world, met a wise one who's also like, you need to come to us and get trained in the Aiel Waste. And she's like, I'll tag along too, Matt and Rand. So she goes with them as well. But Perrin, hearing of these rumors of the two rivers being under attack and, you know, with white cloaks and all this stuff there, he decides he wants to go. Aiel wants to go with him. He's like, no, because he's planning on turning himself in. He doesn't want Aiel to try to stop him. So she then tricks Loyal into bringing him as well. They end up going into the ways with 3 Aiel, Gaul, Bane, and Chiad, who clearly have like an odd dynamic as well. I hated this read through. Pretty much everything in the ways from before till after between Perrin and Aiel. I know I'm supposed to hate it because it's young adults in love bickering, and it's supposed to be annoying, and it was. But I love the little bromance between Gaul and Perrin. They're fantastic. And that's something I really hope the show still captures. Just the friendships that build like this, they're so important. Also Loyal, just bae, just love the guy, want to give him a big old hug. Extraordinary, simply fantastic character, one of the ones I'm most excited to see in the show, and his awkwardness through all of this is so relatable, such a delight. But they arrive at the two rivers, and quite a bit happens here, more than I originally remembered, because Perrin arrives with his little strange party, and he comes into a very tense situation on several levels. One, there are Trollocs raiding the two rivers. Two, there are white cloaks providing some protection when it's convenient. And there's this figure, Lord Luke, who's providing advice that on surface level can kind of help, but if you take a deeper look, is certainly not the best options available for these people. So is he an idiot, or is there something more nefarious at play? And on top of that, we have Padon Fane, now going by Ordeith, who is with these white cloaks. And there's one thing we know about white cloaks. They're pieces of shit. Like, oh, there's terrible, terrible individuals who are so far up their own ass they can feel their lungs on their ears. Like, they are the worst. And combining that with Ordeith, not pleasant. That coffee is cold now. Perrin arrives at the main city. He's brought in, and he gets the worst news of his life, and that's that his entire family has been butchered by Trollocs. Some people have very much so criticized this scene because Perrin just emotionally falls apart and Aiel is there for him, and this kind of solves a lot of the tension they've had between them because, of course, news like this will just bury the hatchet in almost any dispute. Some people have said Perrin's reaction, that's it, and then he just seems fine. I would say you're not paying close enough attention because Perrin goes from this emotional falling apart to very emotionally numb to then on a revenge spree. Because as this progresses and more people kind of fall into Perrin and agree with his logic to bring in all the people, come together, form arms, and try and defend the town, he then goes out and starts aggressively hunting and killing Trollocs. That, to me, was his grieving, because it's kind of out of character for Perrin up until this point. He's not the bold, go out and kill him guy. He's a more reserved, think it through planet. But in this moment, he just rides out and starts this Trolloc slaughter, and that was his grief to me. And as someone who has experienced death of people close to them, I know the emotional gambit you can go through, and while it's not the most 100% perfect depiction, it is aligning with what I know some people can handle it. But he is then surprised attacked, and when this occurs, he takes a pretty grievous injury and ends up, having to be recovered. He also goes into the wolf dream while here, discovers this person named Slayer, who is killing wolves in the wolf dream, which essentially kills them forever. Big no-no. Works with Hopper to try and find the guy, and eventually there's a conflict where Perrin manages to wound Slayer. At next day, Lord Luke, in a wound in the similar spot, rides out of town like, oh shit! And that's when we, the reader, get to go, okay, duh, Lord Luke Slayer. That totally wasn't obvious from the beginning. There's also some tinkers that have come and been brought into the two rivers, and Aram, of course, has now picked up a sword, leaving the way to leave behind, which is a parallel to a lot of what we learn about in the Aiel. Okay, he's now with Perrin and wielding a sword. I did just mention that as well, because I'd get comments if I didn't. During all of this, there were also a couple Aes Sedai who were among the two rivers who were looking for more girls who could channel to then bring back to the White Tower. They don't play too huge of a role aside from just kind of acting as support for Perrin and occasionally wise voices. I like their presence. They just didn't have as much impact in the plot as I thought they would. Also, Abel Coffin and Tam Althor have been off surviving with these people as well, because of course the White Cloaks want to find and kill them as well, we assume. And okay, more things happen, build up, build up, build up. The final attack on the Two Rivers, probably top 3 battles of the Wheel of Time. And there's this siege where Loyal and Gaul went off to close the way gates that were allowing the Trollocs into the Two Rivers. They succeeded, but by the time they did, and survived with some injury, good on them, there was still already thousands of Trollocs there. So Perrin sends off Aiel to try and go get help from Caemlyn, but he knows she won't be able to get back in time, but it's just saving her life. She agrees. If he marries her, he marries her. They're married. The battle occurs with the White Cloaks now in line with the Two Rivers people because Perrin agrees to turn himself over after the battle is over. Happens. It's a pretty rough fight with a lot of Two Rivers people dying, and it's not the first time that villagers have fought the Trollocs, but it's definitely the most intense. And during the fight, right as things are about to fall apart, reinforcements arrive, not from Caemlyn, but from other towns. Aiel didn't go weeks away to Caemlyn. She went days away to these other places, gathered up an army of stubborn, wool-headed idiots who are then like, "We'll kill Trollocs to protect our people!" And they rain arrows down and destroy this Trolloc horde, which even killing fades. It's very impressive. And I love this representation of the Two Rivers people, and it also made me feel like Aiel does belong with Perrin more, because not only does she fit in with him, but she fits in with his way of people's thinking, despite some things that they argue about later on. She is a lot like a Two Rivers person. Intelligent, stubborn, and willing to do what they believe needs to be done regardless of the agreements that have been agreed upon. And Perrin does not turn himself over to the White Cloaks because they actually didn't help during the fight. So fuck you, White Cloaks. So then we have a side plot with Elaine and Nynaeve at the center of it. And what they're doing is essentially effectively trying to espionage, find out, explore the Black Aja and Forsaken. And I initially didn't have many even memories of this side plot, but going through it again, I just love Nynaeve so much. Because yes, there are aspects and angles to her that can be rough and kind of unlikable, but understanding where she's coming from, it always makes sense. She's a protector. She thinks she's the one who should be put in danger, not others. She's always putting herself in harm's way. And her allowing someone like Elaine to even take on some responsibility is hard for her, not because she's stupid or selfish, but because she's so unwilling to accept the idea of someone she loves becoming hurt. But they discover a Black Aja plot with some evil devices that are planned to be used on Rand and things like this, and they do things to have it no longer take place. The two significant things here are they are both just put under compulsion and controlled and questioned by one of the Forsaken. And some people have said, okay, why didn't this Forsaken kill them after this is done? Which is a valid question. One, the Forsaken are just continually incompetent. But also, two, why would you kill two people who you see as so unbelievably weak and you could come back to whenever you want to and to continue to question in this manner? I get why the Forsaken wouldn't necessarily kill these two here, because they're just couple have accepted that you don't have to be afraid of. You can just come back and interrogate them whenever you want to. They're more valuable to you alive. So that I get. That coffee is very cold now. And then the showdown between Moghedien and Nynaeve. Here, so there's an interesting angle to the One Power. There are people who are so powerful that they can essentially just raw output overwhelm nearly anyone else. Then there are those who are able to be so tactful and nuanced with their weaves and creative that they are a threat. Usually Forsaken are both. Nynaeve finds herself pretty much on equal footing to Moghedien once things are evened out. And she even realizes Moghedien is nervous at a certain point. Wow. To the point where the woman has to end up fleeing in terror of Nynaeve. Nynaeve, this wisdom is a champion. And I don't understand the Nynaeve hate. I just don't. She's so fantastic. And she's also smart. She's so able to read others at times and find like small moments of doubt and uncertainty. She is emotionally extremely intelligent until it comes to herself. She's quite blind with herself, but I'm able to get over that. All right, but now we pick up with Rand, Mat, and Egwene. Egwene is pretty much brought under Wise One apprenticeship and begins learning how to become a wise one, basically, and also acts as an absolutely sensational gateway for us to learn so much detail about the Aiel culture. I can't believe I didn't say that in the video, but yeah, that's an incredible angle to her in this book. And also fully understand the world of dreams. Rand and Mat, though, are given a separate mission. They need to go into Rhuideon. As Mat knows, if he doesn't, he'll die, and Rand just needs to prove he's the Kara Karn, or the chosen one for the Aiel. Rand asks the wise ones if he can go into Rhuideon, which one Aiel, who we come to know as Couladin, is quite upset about because he views Rand as an outsider. Rand is like, hey, my mother was Aiel. And the wise ones are like, no, she was not. She was an outsider who came in that we welcomed. Your father was an Aiel. Your mom's from Andor. But yeah, you're half Aiel, so you can go. And then Mat's like, me? I need to go. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go. And they're like, no, absolutely not. Mat, you cannot do this. This is a sacred religion. I'm gonna go. And then Rand's like, he's gonna go. And then the wise ones are like, oh, fine. To which Couladin then shits a brick about, which I know Couladin sucks. Like, he's an awful person, but there's like a little tinge of me that does feel bad for him because he's feels like his culture is being violated in a way, which it kinda is. His reaction to it, though, is just over the top, childish, and stupid. But Rand and Mat then go into Rhuideon, and Rand goes through these pillars, and the true history of the Aiel is provided to us, and it is a hard to swallow truth for anyone, I feel like, in that situation, where the Aiel's origin was oathbreakers. They are people who pledged a certain duty and broke it. They once followed a pacifist lifestyle, and now their entire identity is tied to war. Specifically, warring people who take oaths as sacred, so not a great mix. And we even see an Aiel, Couladin's brother, who's currently going through this test, kill himself, die, because he just can't handle the truth. Aiel's individual value, it does come from their heritage and culture. It's extraordinarily important to them. And so finding out it's one big lie is heartbreaking. They're in love with their culture. And so having this dark history put forth is rough. And we'll get into that obviously more in a minute. Mat also, well, he's chilling in the city while Rand does this, finds another twisted doorway, and he's like, I'll get more answers! So he just assumes it's also the same doorway as before, and goes in, because fucking Mat. And here we see a brilliant example of Mat's intelligence and stupidity, because he comes into this doorway, and he encounters different people. Before we had the Aelfin, now it's the Eelfin. Or other way around, I don't know, I can't keep them straight. But he's brought through in a similar way, and he then goes to the chamber where he like gets to ask questions again, and he starts asking questions and they're just silent. And so then he starts saying other things, and he accidentally makes demands, and it turns out here you don't get answers, you get wishes fulfilled. And he didn't name a price for fulfilling his 3 wishes, so they get to name it. He wished for his memory to be filled, he wished to be rid of Aes Sedai, and then he says he wants to be back in Rhuideon. And then the people are like, okay, deal, but you didn't name a price, so we get to take it. He's then hung in Rhuideon. He's hung. Which I've always wondered, did they come through the doorway while Rand was in the pillars and they were just like, sup, and hang Mat? Because that's odd. It's just a weird scene to see these people like coming on through and then hanging Mat and then just booking it back through there. I want to see that scene play out. I'm very curious, but we don't get to see it. Rand is then finished with his vision quest, finds Mat hanging, gives him CPR, and Mat regains consciousness. He now has some gifts. So he got his wishes fulfilled. He's back in Rhuideon. He can't be channeled out. He's got memories, so win? Heading back to camp, though, they are attacked by Couladin and his people. Couladin accuses Rand of killing his brother because he has returned before his brother did. And Couladin's like, there's no way you could return. And Rand's like, your brother's not handling it too well in there, by the way. And then Rand unveils his 2 tattoos, and that makes him the official Kara Karn. That's right. I'm the Kara Karn! Because my ink is so cool. My TIE Fighter tattoo means I'm the chosen one in Narnia. And now they plan to go to a giant meeting place with a bunch of the Aiel clans to announce what Rand is. The problem is, though, Couladin and the Shido leave first to try and, like, subvert Rand's position and potential authority, so they have to then book it after them. There's also some peddlers who are tagging along during this time. One group of people the Aiel actually led into the Aiel Waste. There's one person who's clearly being set up to be one of the Forsaken. There's also a dream sequence where Rand is sexually assaulted by Lanfear. He's then saved inadvertently by another one of the Forsaken, and thank you, other Forsaken, for preventing a sexual assault? I don't know if you... It did strike me this time as him, like, watching this happen and being like, hey, don't do that. So, thank you. But when Rand wakes up, Aviendha accidentally reveals to him that the Wise Ones have been spying on his dreams, which is a violation of all kinds of privacy. And Rand wants to then learn how to protect his dreams. That'll come up later. Aviendha is being forced to be like Rand's tutor in the Aiel ways, but she hates it and he doesn't like it because they just don't get along and are not best buds, but that's a discussion for another time. Another book, perhaps. Can I just say one thing that does strike me? There needs to be more explicit, outright sex within Wheel of Time. I don't know if this is going to be a weird rant for me to go on, but there's so much nudity, there's so much sexual tension, and there's so many different cultures. To me, it strikes me as a bit odd how much these adults, they are adults at this point, are just letting sexual tension simmer, which if it was a standard medieval Europe kind of fantasy world, I'd be like, okay, fine, but this is not that. As we know, this is actually a post-apocalyptic Earth, and so it doesn't feel like those same values would necessarily be there. The more I've thought about Wheel of Time world building, the more I'm pro-casual sex. I don't know. It just strikes me as a bit odd. Fight me. But then when Rand finally arrives at this Aiel gathering place, there is a humongous confrontation as Couladin pronounces himself the Karakarn, showing matching tattoos to Rand, and says he saw the histories where the Aiel were great people who he'll take back to... And then Rand steps forward, he's like, hey, you guys are oath breakers and you used to follow the way of the leaf. That's the real history. And then the clan chiefs are all like, That's true. Couladin, you're a liar. And then a civil war kind of breaks out between the Aiel, as some are loyal to Rand because their clan chiefs are saying he's the right person, and then there's the Shido, who are like going through this propaganda route. And of course, that's the easier way, so some people want to go that way. And during all of this, Rand confronts Lanfear. But instead of having what I think is a nice subversion, a fight with Rand versus Lanfear, because that needs more time to simmer. I like that we're giving more time for that. Instead, Lanfear's like, hey, Asmodean's the one who put those tattoos on Couladin, and also, he's in Rhuidean right now if you want to go fight him. And then Rand's like, I'll do that, because I don't like fighting women, because I'm having a lot of internalized sexism. So he then goes to Rhuidean and has a lengthy battle with Asmodean, where he defeats him, and Lanfear puts a shield on Asmodean that essentially only allows him to trickle a channel, and then he is charged with helping Rand learn to use the male half the one power, which is so brilliant. I love that he's forced into this situation, and then Rand has to take in this person who everyone thinks is just a part of the peddler wagon, who's like a gleeman, under his wing, who's secretly teaching him, and it's one of the Forsaken. Oh, damn. And then they end up having like a bickering friendship? It's odd. And it's also just great character building for Lanfear, because she's explicitly like, I'm going to make it sure the other Forsaken think you've betrayed us. So you can't betray Rand, because he's your only hope of being saved, which she is smart and vindictive. Rand then returns to this Aiel gathering, and the only ones that remain are the ones that support him, and he is instated as the Karakarn, and now has some Westland nations behind him as well as most of the Aiel. That is essentially where this one ends, and it's the first time the formula's been broken of the group splitting up then coming back together. Now they do feel more scattered, and it struck me this time as it's because they're more capable. They aren't needing to rely on each other as much. They are finding their own individual powers and agency and abilities, but on top of that, there is a breakdown of communication happening within the party as they are becoming aligned, all within the light, but to their own sides of the light, right? We have the White Tower at play. We have Rand and his mission. We have some that are more individualistic, like Matt. We have Egwene, who's kind of going on her own, like, self-exploration journey, but it very much so makes sense for her. And I like that there can be these divisions within one side. It's one of the things that I like more about modern fantasy, where there's not just this clear-cut evil good, there is a more refined, you know, the right and wrong can be more grayed and muddle. You could make the case that Perrin going back for the Two Rivers is selfish. He needs to stick by Rand, but at the same time, it was the right, he felt it was a right choice for him to make. It was good. He's helping save the people who raised him, so it all mixes up quite well. I like that Matt is such a better friend as the series is kind of moving through. He's getting over that initial fear and the stories he was told around Rand, and he's becoming more supportive, and their underlying friendship is still strong. The cultural clashes between everyone and the Aiel I find to be a great source of humor and such a strong element to what makes the Wheel of Time the Wheel of Time. Culture is at the heart of the world building always, and it's beautiful. The themes of doubt and self-reflection and stress and PTSD are continually turning the gears of what moves characters and evolves them and develops them. Rand specifically, I just love even more this time through it because of how careful and nuanced and flawed intentionally he is becoming. Like, God, it's just wonderful. The most interesting bit to me, though, is shifting power dynamics, because as these characters are becoming more self-actualized, I guess, their rejection of traditional powers like Aes Sedai that they've been told they need to fall in line with, and their growth, it's rapid, but it feels very realistic, right? Like, Rand is flat out telling Aes Sedai no, and he's pushing against people who are in places of extreme authority, but he's not the only one doing that from the Two Rivers. Others are now, because they're realizing to doubt the institutions that existed because they're seeing firsthand the flaws that have driven them for so long. It just works. And it feels like a journey I've gone on as an adult where I've become extremely disillusioned, and I feel like most people do, or at least have in the last 10 or so years, with institutions and powerhouses at play. The more like the guise of like authority, the false curtain of what, you know, power is pulled back, the more you're willing to question and fight it. But yeah, this is definitely one of the best Wheel of Time books, probably like a 9 to 10 out of 10 for me. I think it's some of Robert Jordan's best, and it's followed up by one that I actually have a lot more problems with than I remembered. So we'll get into that next month. Anyway, everyone, like and subscribe if you have not already. Let me know what you think of this Wheel of Time book in the comments down below, and have a good one, y'all. Peace.